Welcome to the Summer Food Service Program training on Common Review Findings hosted by the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs. This training will review the most common findings from SFSP administrative reviews conducted by ODE C&P specialists and how to properly correct the findings to prevent them from occurring. The objective of this training is to assist sponsors to operate SFSP successfully by identifying selected situations from reviews that have resulted in findings. We will discuss the situation, why it would be a finding, and how to correct the situation. The first situation we will discuss involves the point of service meal count. During the review, the child nutrition specialist observes a meal service where the meal count is completed after the meal service time has ended and participants have left the site. The sponsor explains to the specialist that the meal count is taken based on the number of plates that are returned after the meal service. Situation 1 is a finding. The point of service meal count was executed incorrectly. The point of service meal count must be taken once a complete reimbursable meal is given to a participant. The point of service meal count cannot be taken prior to the meal being offered or based on the number of plates returned. It is critical that site personnel and monitors understand the importance of accurate point of service meal counts. Only complete meals served to eligible children can be claimed for reimbursement. Therefore, meals must be counted at the actual point of service, i.e., meals are counted as they are served. This will ensure that an accurate count of complete and reimbursable meals is obtained and reported. Point of service meal count requirements can be found in the SFSP Administrative Guidance for Sponsors, Chapter 7, Staff Duties and Training. Now let's discuss corrections to prevent this finding. To correct, the sponsor would need to develop and implement a point of service meal count procedure that ensures the point of service is taken as the meal is served to participants. In the procedure, you would need to include staff positions responsible for point of service meal counts at each site. In addition, train the site staff on proper point of service meal counts and have records of this training available for review. The second situation we will discuss involves the meal pattern. During the review, the ODE C&P Child Nutrition Specialist examines a menu that includes a combination pizza food item offered at lunch service. The menu does not include any additional meat alternate, but does include a fruit. The sponsor explains to the specialist that the pizza, which includes cheese, green peppers, and onions, credits towards the meat alternate component and the fruit and vegetable component. The sponsor explains that there is no crediting documentation for the combination pizza item. Situation 2 is a finding. The sponsor failed to meet meal pattern requirements. Crediting information was not maintained to document the amount of meat alternate component and fruit and vegetable component the pizza credits. Combination food items contain foods from one or more food groups and credit for more than one meal component. Combination foods may be homemade or commercially prepared. Homemade combination foods for those that are assembled from multiple ingredients in a kitchen serving the sponsor's sites, whether the kitchen is operated by the sponsor or operated by the vendor from whom the sponsor is purchasing meals. To count homemade combination food items toward the meal pattern component requirements, the sponsor must have a written recipe documenting the amount of all ingredients in the product. For commercially prepared combination foods, the sponsor must have either a CN label or product formulation statement or MPFS on file. Information on CN labels can be found in the Federal Regulation 7 CFR 225.20. Information on product formulation statements can be found in the SFSP Nutrition Guide, Part 1, Planning Quality Meals. Now let's discuss corrections you can make to prevent this finding. To meet meal pattern requirements, the sponsor should develop and implement a procedure for ensuring that all menu documentation for combination foods is maintained. In the procedure, you will need to include what additional components would be offered during a meal service that includes a combination food if crediting information is not available. For instance, a cheese stick for the meat alternate component and carrots for the fruit and vegetable component. This needs to be included in the procedure in order to guarantee a complete reimbursable meal is offered. In addition, you would need to maintain the crediting documentation on file, e.g. the CN label, recipe for homemade combination foods, or product formulation statement. Situation 3 involves proper site monitoring. During the review, the child nutrition specialist assessed the site monitoring documentation for each site. There is no documentation available that shows first week visits were completed for all sites. Additionally, the specialist notes that the first week visit waivers were not requested in C&P Web and therefore not approved by ODE C&P. There is documentation to demonstrate site reviews were completed, but not for all sites, and site reviews were not completed within the first 4 weeks of operation. The sponsor explains they didn't know how often the sites must be monitored. Situation 3 is a finding. The sponsor failed to conduct and document all site monitoring visits and reviews. Sponsors must ensure that all site monitoring requirements are met. At a minimum, sponsors must complete the following monitoring requirements. Pre-operational visits. Sponsors should visit all new and problem sites before they begin operations. These visits are required to make sure that the sites have facilities to provide meal services for the number of children expected to attend. Site visits. Generally, sponsors are required to visit all sites at least once during the first week of operation. However, pending waiver approval from the USDA, the first week site visit requirement is waived for returning sites that operated successfully during the previous summer or other most recent period of operation and had no serious deficiency findings. Sponsors of these sites are still required to review the site within the first 4 weeks of operation. Site reviews. Sponsors must review all sites at least once during the first 4 weeks of program operations. After this initial period, sponsors must conduct a reasonable level of monitoring. If the site operates less than 4 weeks, the sponsor must still conduct a review. All visits and reviews must be documented. Records of visits and reviews will help sponsors assess the operations of sites. Information on site monitoring requirements can be found in the SFSP Monitor's Guide, Monitor Responsibilities. Monitor's Guide also includes sample visits and review forms, as well as SFSP Administrative Guidance for Sponsors, Chapter 8, Program Integrity. Now let's discuss corrections that can be made to prevent this finding. The sponsor would need to develop and implement a procedure for site monitoring. The procedure would need to include an SFSP schedule that states when site reviews and visits will be completed and a system for handling monitor reports. Sponsors should have a system that will ensure that monitors return reports frequently. The reports should be immediately reviewed by sponsor staff who is responsible for following up on any problems. In the procedure, include the staff responsible for reviewing the reports, that the reports will be reviewed for quality, and how additional training will be provided if monitors do not complete the monitor reports adequately. In addition, you will need to include which staff will be responsible for following up on any problems identified during site visits or reviews. Further, the sponsor would need to train the site monitors on how to properly conduct the visits and reviews and use the reports and maintain documentation of the training. The last situation we will review that is a common review finding is training site personnel. During the review, the ODE C&P Child Nutrition Specialist interviews site personnel, and based on responses to the question, it's clear that the site personnel has not been trained. When asked to see the site personnel training documentation, the sponsor responds that they do not keep training documents. Situation 4 is a finding. The sponsor failed to provide training to site personnel. Sponsors are required to annually train all administrative staff and site staff before they undertake their responsibilities. The date, names of attendees, and documentation of the topics covered must be recorded and maintained for each training session offered. Information on training requirements can be found in the SFSP Administrative Guidance for Sponsors, Chapter 7, Staff Duties and Training. Attachment 15 includes training checklists for the training sessions. Now let's discuss corrections that can be made to prevent this finding. The sponsor would need to develop and implement a procedure for site personnel training. The procedure would need to include a system for tracking site personnel training and which staff will be responsible for conducting each training session. In addition, the procedure would need to include how staff hired after the initial training or volunteers that arrived after the initial training will be trained. Documentation of all SFSP site personnel training must be maintained on file. All resources discussed during this training, including the SFSP Administrative Guidance for Sponsors, Monitor's Guide, Nutrition Guidance for Sponsors, and 7 CFR 225 are all available on the ODE C&P SFSP public website at the link included on this screen. Thank you for participating in Common Review Findings training for the Summer Food Service Program. If you have any questions, please contact your assigned child nutrition specialist. We greatly appreciate the work that you do to fuel Oregon's future.